Previous episode says, Rick and the others ventured out to rescue Beth and Carol. Michonne, the three of them stayed behind at the church. Carl placed weapons in front of Gabriel and told him to choose one, teaching him that everyone has to learn to protect themselves. Gabriel had been completely defenseless since eschatology, and it was a miracle that he had managed to survive on his own until now. He reluctantly picked up one of the long knives as Carl enthusiastically instructed him on how to stab a zombie in the head. Gabriel still felt unable to accept it and apologized to Carl before retreating to his room. Everyone believed Gabriel to be a useless coward, but his actions in the future would overturn people's perception of him. When he returned to his room, instead of resting, Gabriel pried open the floor using the knife until it was large enough for him to fit through. With the front door and windows sealed shut, he resorted to this method just to slip out. However, Gabriel had some bad luck as he stepped on a nail just 2 steps away. Later, he arrived at the school where Gareth and the others had captured Bob. He searched the ground continuously, unaware of what he was looking for. Finally, he found a backpack containing a Bible. That's when he saw Bob's severed leg, and he couldn't believe it. Gabriel must have been initially threatened by Gareth and the others to approach Rick and lead them to the church. However, he never anticipated the depravity of these people, who had actually cannibalized Bob's leg while he was still alive. That's why he became so distraught. At this time, the zombies inside the school broke through the glass, and countless zombies poured out. Gabriel had no choice but to escape. He had no fighting ability whatsoever, due to his injured foot. He couldn't shake off the zombies and instead led them to the church. He initially planned to return to his room by the same route, but the zombies had already surrounded him, forcing him to continue running. He shouted loudly, pleading to let him in. He is now like the churchman. He turned away from the door. Carl and Michonne finally heard the cries for help. They were puzzled about how Gabriel got outside, but now was not the time to investigate. Michonne quickly strapped Judith onto her back, grabbed her weapons, and prepared to go for support. However, the nailed door was difficult to pry open. They could only hear Gabriel's desperate cries from outside. In the end, Michonne had no choice but to use an axe to break it open. They couldn't let Gabriel wait outside to die. Gabriel watched the approaching zombies, and he was losing his mind. He had never imagined such a day would come. Carl had taught him to use weapons for self-defense, but he believed it would stain his soul. But now, both humans and zombies were dangerous. Fortunately, the door finally opened, and Gabriel quickly ran inside. However, the church had also been overrun. Michonne stood as the last line of defense, killing the approaching zombies, but their numbers were too great. Gabriel urgently shouted for them to go to his room. After the three entered, they quickly closed the door, but the zombie's hand got stuck in the door crack, making it difficult to close. Gabriel hurriedly instructed Carl and Michonne to escape from under the floor. Without any hesitation, the two of them swiftly took action. This time, Gabriel was not cowardly. He took charge of covering their retreat. Fortunately, he managed to climb out without any trouble. Soon, Carl and Michonne reached the entrance of the church again. They intended to trap the zombies inside. They found some wooden boards and securely fastened the door shut. The zombies were successfully locked inside, but they had lost another shelter. Michonne then asked Gabriel where he had been earlier. He explained that he had gone to the school to see if the world was really as dangerous as it seemed. While they were talking, the wooden boards on the door started falling off. It seemed that they wouldn't be able to hold back the zombies for much longer. Just then, the sound of a car engine reached their ears. That turned out to be Abraham and his group. He parked the car right in front of the church entrance. Washington was a hoax, so they had come back. Although Eugene had deceived them, they hadn't abandoned him. After getting out of the car, Maggie embraced her old friends, and being together with the team felt truly wonderful. Glenn also explained their situation to Michonne, and upon hearing about Eugene's actions, Michonne was also speechless for a while. Maggie couldn't believe her ears when she heard that her younger sister was still alive. Voice with a tremor, her sister was alive. There was no better news than that. The others also smiled. Tara suggested, let's set off right away. We'll go together to rescue your sister. Meanwhile, Rick had already contacted the hospital staff through the walkie-talkie. After a few minutes, 2 police officers sent by the hospital arrived at the negotiation site. Rick introduced himself and, as a gesture of goodwill, placed his handgun on the ground to prevent any unexpected incidents. The others had already positioned themselves on the rooftop. Rick spoke straightforwardly, "We have 2 of your people with us. We only want to exchange Carol and Beth." The 2 police officers pondered for a moment and then asked where their people were. Before they could finish their inquiry, a zombie behind them collapsed. Startled, They looked around nervously. After further communication, Dawn agreed to the hostage exchange. They brought Rick and his group to the 5th floor of the hospital. Beth had changed into the clothes she wore before coming here, and Carol had regained consciousness. Dawn and her people stood ready, prepared for any situation. Rick saw Carol and Beth through the glass. To ensure a smooth transaction, Dawn signaled her subordinates to put away their guns. Rick naturally understood the protocol and instructed everyone to secure their weapons. Subsequently, both parties walked in and commenced the exchange. Rick spoke directly, stating, "We haven't harmed them, we just want to complete the trade safely." Dawn quickly noticed that Bob was not present. Rick hadn't spoken yet, but the 2 police officers spoke up first. They revealed that Officer Bob had been attacked by a zombie, and they had witnessed it themselves. Dawn knows what's going on but doesn't poke at it. Although Bob was a good person, he was also the one with the highest chances of replacing Dawn at the hospital. The hostage exchange was completed without any conflict erupting. Just as Rick and his group were preparing to leave, Dawn spoke up again, saying that Noah had to stay behind. Rick stopped. These people probably thought he was a very good-tempered man. Even the others from the hospital thought Dawn shouldn't stir up trouble anymore and let them go. However, Dawn's intention was clearly to save face and regain some control. Noah didn't want to cause trouble for Rick and his group, so he stepped forward willingly, indicating his willingness to stay behind. He returned the gun to Rick. Beth caught up at this moment and tightly hugged Noah.
"I knew you'd be back."
Upon hearing these words, Beth became displeased. She also understood why she was given the keys before. Noah left, and Dawn was now short of a servant. That's why she had helped Beth. This woman was using the pretext of helping others, but it was merely to serve her own interests and even to expand her power. The unexpected turn of events caught everyone off guard. Dawn acted purely out of self-defense. She never intended to kill Beth. Blood splattered onto Rick's body, leaving everyone in a state of shock, including the people from the hospital who couldn't believe what had just happened. Dawn wanted to explain, but Rick's anger erupted like a raging fire. Daryl shot and ended Dawn's life. Tensions escalated once again between the 2 sides. Daryl and the others had tears in their eyes, but they were not ignorant individuals.
Hold your fire! It was just about her.
It was clear that Dawn, driven by her vanity, had caused harm not only to others but also to herself. A heavy atmosphere weighed upon Rick's team. They never anticipated losing Beth at such a critical moment. A female police officer spoke up, suggesting they could stay at the hospital, as it was better than being outside. With this incident taking place, Abraham and the others arrived at the hospital. The yard was littered with zombie corpses, indicating that Rick and his group were inside. At that moment, someone walked out from the entrance, and Maggie's face lit up with a smile. It was assumed that they had successfully rescued Beth. Rick led them out, but sadness was evident on everyone's faces as they beheld the scene behind them. Their smiles froze, especially for Maggie, who had imagined countless reunions with her sister along the way. They never expected this outcome. It was unbearable for Maggie to accept that the gentle and kind-hearted Beth had departed from them in this manner. In the world of eschatology, survivors without a home have to wander around. Rick and his group set out to find their next refuge. Their current objective was to reach a mansion located 10 miles away. It was the place where Noah had once lived, and he claimed that it had high walls capable of keeping the zombies at bay. Inside, they could live self-sufficiently. However, as they approached the mansion, something felt off. In theory, there should have been people on guard duty, but the main gate was tightly shut and devoid of any signs of life. Glenn glanced inside and let out a sigh, shaking his head. It seemed that the place had already fallen. Noah grew anxious because his family was still inside. They proceeded to climb over the walls and surveyed their surroundings. The houses were in ruins, and decaying corpses littered the ground. This estate must have fallen for a long time. Can't imagine what has happened to it. Noah collapsed, holding his head and crying in despair. His family was most likely in grave danger. Rick and the others were also deeply disappointed. While others were still waiting for good news from them, he could only reluctantly use the walkie-talkie to contact Carol to inform them of the situation here. After all, they had come this far. They decided to search around here to find something useful to bring back. They couldn't return empty-handed. Meanwhile, Tyreese stayed by the side of a grieving Noah, trying to comfort and encourage the young boy. Noah seemed to remember something and ran off towards a distance. A few minutes later, he stopped at a house. It was his own home. No matter what had happened, he wanted to go back and see. Once inside, a lifeless body lay on the floor. It was his mother. He didn't shed tears, but gently covered her with a towel. Too late after all. Tyreese sensed that there was something in the room. He went in to investigate. There lay a body on the bed, long dead. Then he noticed the photos on the wall. Appeared to be Noah's brothers. Just as he was deeply engrossed in observing, the body on the bed stood up. By the time Tyreese reacted, the zombie had bitten his arm. Noah rushed over upon hearing the commotion. He bid his brother a final farewell. Only then did he see Tyreese's condition. He urged him to hold on while he went to get help. Meanwhile, Rick and the others were searching for supplies. They seemed to have discovered the reason behind the estate's destruction. The perimeter walls had clearly been rammed by vehicles. There were countless limbs and severed arms on the ground, but notably, no upper bodies. It was incredibly eerie. After careful examination, they realized the breached walls were a result of an attack by deranged individuals. At this time, the three heard Noah's shout in the distance. They immediately took out their weapons and rushed towards the sound. When they arrived, several zombies were attacking Noah. Rick quickly went to his aid. Noah hastily informed them about Tyreese's situation. The four of them were filled with urgency as they ran towards Noah's house. Tyreese was drenched in sweat by now. He was experiencing hallucinations, seeing Lizzie and her sister, seeing Beth playing the piano, even the sight of Bob, who had only one leg, all comforting him, telling him everything would be fine, not to worry. Even the governor appeared in the room. Then, in a dazed state, he saw Lizzie reaching out for his hand, when in reality it was Rick pulling him. They quickly took Tyreese and hurriedly retreated, hoping that amputating his arm would save his life. After all, Herschel managed to survive that way. They gathered outside the back door, where more than a dozen zombies had congregated. But now, there was no choice. Rick entrusted Tyreese to Noah's care. He had to join the others in clearing out the zombies. 3 minutes later, the zombies were completely eliminated. They assisted Tyreese and hurried to their vehicle. Although Tyreese was awake, his vision was filled with illusions. He saw only the faces of the deceased. His mind was like a flipping notebook, flashing everything that had happened since the eschatology. Finally, they reached the location of the vehicle. Time was of the essence now. Rick quickly informed Carol to prepare for cauterization and bandaging. They needed to staunch the bleeding as soon as they got back. The car was already at maximum speed, but Tyreese's eyes remained open. He continued to see his departed teammates. It is said that before one dies, one sees those who have died and sees them coming to greet one. Sure enough, after traveling a distance, the car came to a stop. Rick and the others opened the doors and carried Tyreese out. He still couldn't hold out and eventually bled to death. That's it. Within a short span of time, they lost another teammate. In the eschatology, survival meant being constantly on the move. Life was unpredictable. Tomorrow and accidents were simply beyond human control.